What's up, Green Nation? Today, things get serious. This week felt like a massive spotlight was switched on right in the heart of our team's locker room, revealing strengths, exposing weaknesses, and making it clear that something big is about to unfold. If you breathe this passion like I do, hit that like button if you're a faithful Birds fan, and drop a comment below. Which city are you watching this video from? And if you're watching this video right now, you already know exactly which name lit the match. Jaylen Phillips. The guy didn't just debut as an Eagle, he detonated onto the field. 7 quarterback pressures, 6 tackles, 2 for loss, a fumble recovery, and constant disruption that kept Jordan Love unsettled from the first quarter to the last. And when you go back to the tape, it all holds up. The explosiveness, the leverage, the motor, the physicality. You can tell why some people wondered whether he'd ever be the same physically after everything he went through, medically retiring in college, the Achilles tear in 2023, the ACL in 2024, but Monday night didn't look like a guy who lost anything. It looked like a guy who found himself again, and if he keeps stacking performances like that, it's going to force the Eagles into a real decision about his long-term future. Because here's the thing, edge rushers who play like that get paid. They don't just get interest, they get serious, aggressive, top-tier interest. And while it's unrealistic to expect that exact stat line every week, if his floor ends up being as good as what we saw Monday, then he becomes one of the hottest free agent trench players on the market. And that's where the Eagles face that tug-of-war between roster building and financial reality. If he balls out for the rest of the season, he might simply price himself out of Philadelphia. The front office knows that. Other teams know that. And the Eagles may end up taking a compensatory third-round pick for him if someone throws him the kind of contract that Howie Roseman just can't match. But the twist to all of this is that none of that matters right now, because what matters is this trade. This move looks like one of the best mid-season decisions this front office has made in a long time. And it wasn't just the pass rushing that stood out. His effort against the run, the urgency, the movement skills, the willingness to chase plays down from the backside, that's where you saw the difference-making potential. It's where you felt like, man, this guy isn't just back. He might be better than he ever was. Now from there, the conversation shifts into the secondary, because the cornerback situation sparked a lot of questions this week. Fans asking whether the Eagles should go after someone like Stephon Gilmore or even try poaching Asante Samuel Jr. off the Steelers' practice squad. And here's where things get interesting. Not because the Eagles necessarily need another corner, but because the mechanics of the situation make it possible. Samuel is on a practice squad, so the Eagles could absolutely offer him a 53-man roster spot, and Pittsburgh would have to either match it or lose him. The red flag, though, is real: spinal fusion surgery. That's not a minor procedure for an NFL cornerback. If he medically clears, he's talented. Double-digit pass breakups in each of his first 3 seasons, NFL bloodlines, physical instincts. But the truth right now is the Eagles don't look desperate at corner. They've got Quinnen Mitchell playing like a first-team All-Pro, Adoree Jackson settling in and not giving up more than 40 yards in any game since Week 1, Kelee Ringo progressing, Jacorian Bennett back and giving the secondary some needed depth, and with Cooper DeJean playing like the best slot corner in the league and Michael Carter capable of stepping inside when needed, they aren't in panic mode. Jai Alexander was brought in purely as a depth piece, not a starter replacement. It feels like the team is comfortable rolling with what they have, even if the names on the market are intriguing. But while the defense has been the story, the offense has been the headache. The inconsistency, the lack of rhythm, the predictability in certain stretches, all of that came roaring back into the conversation after the Green Bay game. And some of that is absolutely tied to the conditions. 17-degree wind chill, gusts of 20 miles per hour, and a field that made deep shot timing nearly impossible. But even in that reality, fans aren't wrong for pointing out the concerns. Kevin Patullo has moments where he calls the offense like he's afraid to make a mistake. The sequencing can be flat, the creativity vanishes at times, and the flow never syncs the way you want when you're watching a roster loaded with veteran offensive talent. Yet at the same time, last season had the exact same pattern: up and down offense early, then the surge late. Same thing in 2017 when Doug Peterson had to recalibrate after losing Carson Wentz. The Eagles historically find themselves as the season titans, and while this offense hasn't hit that breakthrough yet, the defense playing at a genuinely elite level buys them time. Because right now, the pass rush is one of the best in football, the linebackers are playing at an all-NFL level, Quinnen Mitchell looks like a superstar already, and the safety group is holding steady with Reed Blankenship's reliability and Andrew Mukuba's growth curve. But then comes the curveball question that detonated the fan base more than anything else this week: the situation with A.J. Brown. The speculation, the frustration, the sideline moments, the comments that keep creating storylines, it all adds up. Inside the locker room, he's respected, he's a captain, he has strong relationships, and nobody sees him as a cancer. But emotionally, publicly, he's stirring things up, and it's reached a point where even Nick Sirianni is showing frustration, saying he's close to being done talking about it. No one wants A.J. Brown traded. He's the best receiver in franchise history, a top 5 talent in the league, and one of the pillars of this roster. But great teams don't ignore problems, especially avoidable ones. And if things keep building, if the drama outweighs the production or the stability of the room, then the question of a future trade becomes real, not hypothetical. No one wants it, but it's out there now. All of this sets the stage for what feels like a massive turning point in the season: an elite defense ascending, an offense searching for itself, a receiver situation bubbling beneath the surface, and a pass rusher who might be playing himself into a monster payday. And the biggest question in all of this, the question that could end up defining the next few weeks for this team, is this: how do you think all of these storylines will impact the direction of the Eagles as the season continues to unfold? Picking up right where we left off, the conversation naturally shifts to the core tension building inside this Eagles team, how all these storylines collide with the reality of what's coming next. Because when you start stacking them together, Jaylen Phillips exploding onto the scene, the cornerback depth stabilizing, the offense sputtering behind inconsistent play calling, and the A.J. Brown situation simmering hotter every week, you realize this isn't just noise. It's the kind of combination that can either forge a championship push or expose cracks at the worst time possible. And as we look toward the next matchup and the stretch run behind it, the margin for error shrinks, the pressure increases, and every little detail becomes magnified. The defense is the anchor right now, and it's not an exaggeration to say that this unit is carrying the identity of the team in a way we haven't seen since the early 2000s, when the Eagles built their reputation on nasty fronts and opportunistic secondaries. Quinton Mitchell continues to play like a veteran All-Pro despite being a rookie, and you can feel how confident the coaching staff is with him on an island. Cooper DeJean has become the glue inside, erasing crossers and shutting down the short intermediate middle of the field in a way the Eagles haven't had in years. Adoree Jackson is quietly stacking solid performance after solid performance, something fans often overlook because he's not putting up flashy numbers, but sometimes not hearing a corner's name is the sign that he's doing his job. And the depth behind them gives this group room to adjust, rotate, and withstand injuries in a way last year's unit simply couldn't. But the heart of this video, the heartbeat of this team, keeps circling back to the offense. Not because the talent isn't there, but because the production isn't matching the potential. When you have Jalen Hurts, DeVonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, an experienced offensive line, and a coordinator who spent years inside this system, you expect consistency. You expect identity. You expect rhythm. Yet too often, the offense feels reactive rather than assertive. Too often, the creativity appears only in flashes. And too often, it looks like they're waiting for something to click instead of forcing the action. What makes that even more intense is the A.J. Brown dynamic sitting underneath the surface. He's still producing, still a nightmare matchup for defenses, still physically dominant. But when your captain is visibly frustrated, when he's expressing dissatisfaction publicly, when his comments spark weekly headlines, it creates a ripple effect you can't ignore. It forces the locker room to answer questions that have nothing to do with game plans. It makes the coaching staff walk a tightrope between discipline and patience. It puts Jalen Hurts in a position where he has to repeatedly defend the chemistry that once felt unstoppable. And if it keeps escalating, you start to wonder if it becomes a defining storyline instead of a side note. And then you place all of this into the context of what's coming. Detroit, one of the most physical, multi-dimensional offenses in the league. A team that will test the linebackers, stress the safeties, and force the corners to tackle. Their running back duo is no joke. Jahmyr Gibbs provides explosion and unpredictability, while David Montgomery brings that downhill, bruising power. If the Eagles want to prove this defensive identity is real, this is the measuring stick. Shut down that run game, and you send a message to the rest of the NFC. Get pushed around, and suddenly the questions about the offense hold even more weight because you lose the cushion the defense has been giving you. Everything funnels into this moment. A team with championship expectations trying to stabilize the turbulence, elevate the offense, maintain the defensive dominance, and navigate internal tension that could either galvanize them or fracture them depending on how they handle it. So now I want to hear from the real ones watching this. with everything swirling around this team, the breakout stars, the offensive inconsistency, and the tension around A.J. Brown, how do you think the fans should expect the Eagles to respond going forward? And who do you think needs to step up the most right now? Jumping right back into it, the reality is that everything about this Eagles season feels like it's balancing on a razor's edge. Not in a negative way, but in a way that tells you the next month is going to define exactly who this team is. Because when you combine the explosive rise of Jaylen Phillips, the steady surge of the defense, the uneven pulse of the offense, and the simmering storyline around A.J. Brown, you can feel that this team is standing at the intersection of potential and pressure. And the way they respond from here will either settle the nerves of the fan base or turn this into one of the most scrutinized stretches in recent Eagles memory. Think about where the Eagles were coming into the season. 10 of 11 offensive starters returning from a team that won a Lombardi. An identity built around Jalen Hurts' dual-threat danger, physical line play, and explosive finishing from playmakers all over the field. Everything pointed to the offense being the engine while the defense worked to establish itself under new leadership. Yet here we are, the complete opposite. The defense is the one dictating games, suffocating quarterbacks, eliminating run lanes, and giving the offense chance after chance to find its rhythm. And while that defensive dominance is exactly what you want heading into winter football, it also shines a brighter light on what the offense must fix. And that brings us straight to the coaching, because Kevin Patullo is now the biggest X factor in the entire building. You can tolerate a slow start. You can excuse a bad weather game. You can understand the natural adjustment period that comes with a new voice calling plays. But this far into the season, the Eagles have to see signs of evolution. More motion to manipulate defenses, more sequencing to build drives, more willingness to stay aggressive instead of settling for conservative stretches that kill momentum. You see flashes, the creativity from the Vikings game, the dominance on the ground against the Giants, but the great offenses don't flash. They sustain, and this one needs to get there quickly, because whether we want to admit it or not, the A.J. Brown situation is tethered directly to the offensive inconsistencies. When an offense feels stagnant, every star becomes more frustrated, every target feels more important, every comment hits louder. And while A.J. Brown is an elite talent, a leader, and someone who absolutely wants to win, even his strongest supporters can't deny that he has placed himself at the center of multiple storm clouds this season. The sideline moments, the public comments, the cryptic posts, they don't disappear just because the team is winning. They stack. And when a team sits at 7-2, holding the number 1 seed, fighting to repeat as champions, it forces a tough question. How much of that is emotional competitiveness, and how much is becoming a pattern? You can feel Nick Sirianni reaching his limit, too. When a coach openly says he's close to not answering questions about a star player, that's the moment the fan base should realize this is more than just media noise. Something is off. Something is building, and the Eagles have to get in front of it before it becomes bigger than football. But here's the good news, and it's huge. This team has been here before. Maybe not with the exact same dynamics, but with adversity, with pressure, with questions that linger longer than anyone wants. And every time, the Eagles have responded not by shrinking but by unifying. The leaders in this locker room aren't going to let distractions dictate the result. They've been tested too many times, both individually and collectively. Jalen Hurts has been through quarterback controversies, national criticism, and playoff runs. He doesn't flinch. Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox have lived the ups and downs of this franchise for over a decade. Lane Johnson has carried this team through turbulence more times than anyone can count. And DeVonta Smith continues to be the steady, reliable professional every contending team needs. So as the Eagles turn toward Detroit and the games that will follow, everything comes down to what they choose to be. A team that lets storylines pull them apart, or a team that uses the pressure to sharpen their edge. The coaches need to adjust. The offense needs to respond. The stars need to channel their emotion into production. And the defense needs to continue being the force that gives this team its identity. Because if they put this all together, even just 2 or 3 steps of improvement, this team is absolutely capable of making another deep run. Everything they need is already in the building. The pieces are there. The question is whether they're ready to align at the exact right moment. So before we wrap this up, I want to hear from every diehard watching. With the season hitting its most important stretch, who do you believe will be the biggest difference maker if the Eagles are going to make another championship push? And what's the one adjustment you think they must make immediately? And if you're new here or haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to the channel, drop a like to support the grind, and keep an eye on the screen for more Eagles breakdowns coming up next. Picking it up from exactly where we left off, the final piece of this whole puzzle is the emotional pulse of the fan base, because Eagles fans aren't just spectators, they're pressure gauges. They feel when something's building before anyone else does. And right now, that sense of anticipation is thicker than ever. Not panic, not overreaction. Anticipation. Because every fan watching this knows the truth. This team is too talented, too experienced, and too battle-tested to stay stuck in the middle. One way or another, something is about to shift, and you can sense that shift coming from the players who have been through every type of adversity this league can throw. You look at Jalen Hurts and see a guy who is clearly carrying the weight of the offense, the expectations, the questions, the leadership responsibilities, and the pressure of being the face of a franchise trying to repeat as champions. He's not going to throw teammates under the bus. He's not going to feed drama. He's not going to entertain narratives. But you can see the urgency rising in the way he's talking, the way he's moving, the way he's handling moments. He knows this offense has more in it, and history tells us that when he reaches that breaking point where enough is enough, he usually responds with his best football. The same goes for DeVonta Smith. He's the ultimate stabilizer, never dramatic, never rattled, always ready. When the offense needs someone to settle the game down, it's almost always DeVonta. And as these storylines get louder, don't be surprised if he becomes the quiet force that recenters everything. But as much as the offense needs to step up, the defense can't let its foot off the gas either. This group has become the backbone of the team, and Detroit is exactly the type of opponent that tests that backbone. If the Eagles dominate against that run game, if they take away the physical identity of a team that thrives on breaking tackles and controlling tempo, then that's when the rest of the league starts paying attention. That's when you start talking about the Eagles' defense the way people talked about the 2017 unit. Not as a complimentary piece, as a statement, as the phase of the team that refuses to let games slip, even when the offense is searching for answers. And when you look at the bigger picture, it's actually remarkable that the Eagles are in this position. They're winning. They're atop the NFC. They're improving defensively every week, and yet it feels like they're nowhere near their ceiling. That should scare every opponent in the conference, because if this team ever hits that moment where the offense and defense rise at the same time, even for a stretch of 3 or 4 games, they immediately become the most dangerous team in football again. That's why the next few weeks aren't just games. They're opportunities. They're pressure points. They're the stretch where you find out whether this is simply a talented team or a truly great one. And now, before we close this out completely, here's what I want from every Eagles fan watching. Tell me in the comments which part of this team you believe will make the biggest leap from this point forward. Is it the offense finally finding its identity? The coaching staff tightening up the game plan? The defense taking another step toward dominance? Or is it the locker room pulling together and shutting down every distraction once and for all? Drop your take below, hit subscribe, smash the like button to support the channel, and stick around. There's another video on the screen right now breaking down everything you need to know heading into the next matchup. Go check it out. Picking up right from that energy, the final layer of this entire conversation is the one every contender eventually reaches, the point where talent isn't enough, potential isn't enough, and momentum isn't enough. You reach the stretch of the season where a team has to decide what it wants its identity to be. And that's exactly where the Philadelphia Eagles stand right now. Because for all the talent on this roster, for all the individual performances, for all the defensive dominance, for all the expectations placed on the offense, the real defining trait of championship teams is resilience. Not the kind of resilience you talk about, but the kind you show on Sundays when the pressure shifts from external noise to internal demand. And in the middle of that, you see players stepping into roles they didn't necessarily plan for, but are embracing anyway. Jaylen Phillips wasn't supposed to be a player who changed the tone of the defense this fast, but here he is, suddenly looking like the exact type of midseason spark that reshapes a unit. Quinton Mitchell wasn't supposed to look like a veteran All-Pro before Thanksgiving, but here he is, elevating the entire secondary. Cooper DeJean wasn't supposed to lock down the slot so convincingly this early, but here he is, becoming a stabilizer that the defense leans on in every key situation. And that tells you something important. When young players establish themselves this quickly, it creates momentum inside a locker room that is hard to quantify but impossible to ignore. Veterans feed off it, coaches build around it, opponents notice it. It becomes the kind of internal surge that carries teams deeper into the season with an edge they didn't have in September. But the real test is coming for the offense, because eventually the defense can only carry so much weight. There's going to be a game, maybe against Detroit, maybe later, where the offense has to win it. No weather excuses, no conservative play calling, no leaning on the defense to bail them out. A game where Jalen Hurts has to take control, where Kevin Patullo has to stretch beyond his comfort zone, where the run game has to punish a defense into submission, where the receivers have to dominate the matchups they're paid to dominate, and where the entire unit has to finally play with the rhythm and confidence everyone expected before the season even kicked off. That moment is coming. You can feel it. Every season has one, and the teams that answer that moment the right way almost always find themselves playing meaningful football in late January. And meanwhile, the A.J. Brown situation hangs over all of this like a storm cloud waiting to break in one direction or the other. Either it becomes the rallying point that pulls the offense back together, or it becomes the storyline that the team has to actively fight against every week. The difference between those two outcomes will say a lot about the leadership in that room, the honesty in those conversations, and the willingness of the coaching staff to address tension instead of letting it simmer. Because if this offense gets back to what it was, not even last year, just the consistency and explosiveness they showed in flashes this season, then this team becomes exactly what fans hoped they'd be, a balanced contender with championship-level defense and an offense that can close games the way elite teams do. So as we head deeper into this stretch, the defining question becomes simple. Will the Eagles rise to the moment and unlock the version of themselves that every fan knows they're capable of? Or will these storylines continue to shape the season until the team is forced into decisions no one wants to think about yet? If you're still here and rocking with us, make sure you're subscribed. Drop a like to help push this video to more Eagles fans, and check out the video popping up on your screen right now. It breaks down why this next matchup might be the turning point of the entire season.